Hey, what's up everybody? It's Jason. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing well. Today I've got a brand new movie review for you, and this time it's the latest from Wal Disney Animation Studios, Raya and the Last Dragon. Alright, so before we get started with this review, there's just two things I want to clarify. Number one is a question that I'm sure is on everyone's mind. Is this movie worth the 30 extra bucks to watch on Disney Plus? So I will say first that generally speaking, I think $30 is a hell of a premium to add on top of a subscription-based platform. So to that, I'll just say $30 is nothing to sneeze at. But if you do decide to spend the $30 to watch this film, I do not think you'll be disappointed. And the second thing I wanted to say is that I was looking forward to this movie for a bunch of reasons, but the biggest by far is that Raya and the Last Dragon seems to be the first real representation of Southeast Asian culture in the mainstream, and I think that's incredibly exciting, and it was amazing to see the culture represented so well and with such care on the big screen. But the reason I bring this up is that unfortunately, this kind of historic event coincides with the rise of Asian American hate crimes in America. So at the end of this review, I'd like to save just a minute or two to kind of talk about the issues facing the Asian American community today, a couple of stories that I don't think have garnered enough attention in the media at all. So if you're interested in that, please stick around at the end of this video for a short discussion. But without further ado, let's get into the review of Raya and the Last Dragon. So in this film, we follow our title hero Raya as she tries to save the people that she loves and the entire world from this dark purple cloud Dormammu looking thing that turns people into stone by restoring the magic of dragons that once lived in the world harmoniously with people. So basically the love child of How to Train Your Dragon and Dr. Stone. So one of my favorite things about this film is that yes, you have this kind of purple cloud looking thing that's turning people into stone, and that's supposed to be kind of the villain of the story, but it seems like the main villain of this story was actually people. And essentially what I mean by that is very early on in this film, you're given a lot of exposition and folklore, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But through that, you learn that everybody in this world that you're in used to live together harmoniously with dragons. But essentially, there are some power struggles, and eventually that harmonious land breaks up into, I think, 5 different tribes. So as Raya's trying to save the world and piece it back together, not only is she fighting these like purple cloud monsters, she's also fighting against people and tribes whom at this point, there's just so much bad blood between all of them that they have a really deep-seated mistrust towards one another, and Raya herself has a couple of trust issues. So to me, that's where the real conflict of this film is, and I think that's where it really shines, because with everything kind of going on in the world, it's hard not to see your own society reflected in this kind of conflict. And as an audience member, it was really kind of gratifying to see this story take on that subject matter. Of course, in a very mild sense, but not only do I think it's a great lesson for kids, but it's to me where this movie starts to kind of step out of that Disney like classic formula comfort zone and move on to something a little bit more. At this point, whenever any of us go to see a new Disney animated film, we all know we're in for a treat visually. And just to clarify at this point, this was done by Walt Disney Animation Studios and not Pixar. But because these films have always operated at such a high level visually, it's so easy to just take for granted the animation quality that we're getting from these films and how hard the animators work to make what we're seeing come to life. But despite all those high expectations, without fail, every time I go to see a new Disney animated movie, there's at least 1 or 2 scenes that I'm just in awe while I'm watching it. And in Raya and the Last Dragon, there was one in particular where Caesar the dragon, voiced by Awkwafina, is just kind of like prancing through the rain. And not only is it really stunning when she's going through the clouds, but every step that she takes as a dragon is just kind of like this rainbow pattern appears beneath her feet, and it's just stunning to watch. And on top of that, there were 2 fight scenes in Raya and the Last Dragon in particular that I felt were just really well directed, choreographed, and of course animated. A lot of times when you see movies like this, it's really easy to kind of like cheapen out on a couple of scenes, pull back to, not reveal as many details or do a couple of things out of frames. But with Raya and the Last Dragon, it was really astounding to see how much they captured in frame, how much detail went into the animation, and how smooth all the fight sequences went. And the last thing I'll say about the animation is that I am really excited that when the credits roll for an animated film, I feel like more and more the voice actors aren't like first on the list anymore. It's like directors, writers, producers, and the actual like animators of the film getting the spotlight that they deserve. So I don't know if that's something I've just noticed or it's something that's actually been going on forever. Just haven't picked up on it. But of course, when it comes to an animated film, I think those people are the real stars. Alright, so now on to my favorite part about this film. It's super biased, so you can ignore me if you want, but it's a representation of Southeast Asian culture in Raya and the Last Dragon. Alright, so you may have been noticing that I've been saying Southeast Asian a lot specifically. So real quick, Asia obviously is a huge continent, and culturally, there is a real distinction between Eastern Asian countries, which include, China, Japan, Korea, and Southeast Asian countries, which is represented in this film. And that's Thailand, where I'm from, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, all that good stuff. So the reason that this was such a big deal to me personally was that because I do think there's a huge distinction culturally between Eastern Asians and Southeastern Asians, but for the most part, when Americans at least think of Asians, they think of Eastern Asians, you know, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, which is totally fine. I am just happy that in general, Asian representation is becoming more like mainstream, I guess you could say. And there is nothing wrong with all being categorized together. Nothing at all. But I guess it was always a little bit disheartening because I've always noticed really strong cultural differences between me and, you know, the Chinese people that I've known and befriended in my lifetime, Japanese, Korean people. So to see not only the acknowledgement of Southeastern Asian culture, but the representation of it so well and through such a big platform, you know, Disney Animation Studios, love them or not, I mean, it's a huge platform to be represented on. To know that there are people that care about and to know that there are people that are willing to tell these kinds of stories is really just fulfilling to me. And in relation to Raya and the Last Dragon specifically, it's not that this tale or this folklore was kind of related to Southeast Asian culture specifically. It's more that the animation style and the things that they chose to represent and use as reference to animate from real life are so heavily, in my opinion, tied to things that you'd see in Southeast Asia. It's really wonderful to see. And as far as I can tell, it's not any one Southeast Asian country that they're drawing from. It's a combination of all of them. If you look at the hat that Raya is wearing, for instance, it looks very much to me inspired by Vietnamese culture. There's a lot of food in this movie, especially in the beginning, that just, it looks like, I've been to boat markets in Thailand before. It just looks like the spread that you would find there. There's a soup in particular at the beginning of the movie that reminds me a lot of Tom Yum from Thailand. So that was just really cool to see. Architecturally, a lot of the buildings remind me of Vietnam and Thailand especially. And again, I might be a little bit biased, so please, if you see other countries being represented that I am not representing well in this video, please feel free to add them in the description, or excuse me, in the comments below. But it was just these really sharp, steep rooftops that had kind of like a crescent, or they would have like a dragon at the end of it, which reminded me a lot of the buildings that I've seen in Thailand. And the clothes to me especially were really fun to look at, especially early on in the film when everyone's dressed in formal attire rather than, you know, their battle gear to fight one another. And if I'm being honest, I understand that the representation of Southeast Asian culture doesn't impact the story a whole bunch. It's much more of like a visual impact. But as an audience member, to see that level of representation and to see the story told and the culture represented with such care and dignity, it was really a wonderful experience for me. And my sincerest hope is that this film had just as big of an impact on other members of the Asian American community or people outside of the Asian American community, because at the end of the day, I think Raya and the Last Dragon was just a really thoughtful representation of Southeast Asian culture. Alright, so I don't want to bog this review down just with like Easter eggs that I've seen from Southeast Asian culture, but if you're into that, I did a trailer reaction which kind of goes into more detail with that stuff, so I'll leave a link in the description below. And as far as negatives go for this film, there's really only two that I had in mind. The first is that even though earlier I was talking about how the conflict of this film being people versus people kind of makes the film step outside of the comfort zone of that Disney formula of movie making, it's the only step they take outside of that circle. Everything else I felt like was very much in line with that classic Disney formula. So there's not a lot of genre-defying expectations in this movie. And the second main issue I had with this film was kind of the exposition dump you get at the very beginning. It tells you all about the background, the folklore, and just, you know, everything you need to know before immersing yourself into the world of this film. And it's not a huge complaint because I understand that this is a child's movie. It's supposed to be anyways. But I feel like in recent years, those even child movies have been kind of stepping it up in terms of storytelling and not relying as heavily on narration or that kind of beginning exposition dump. So for that, I would probably mark down the film a little bit. But again, it's a child's movie, so if you're, taking your family to see this, if you're taking, even yourself, you kind of know what to expect at this point, so it's not a huge deal breaker, but it is just kind of as a warning there. But other than that, the animation quality of this film is of course top notch. I really enjoyed the storyline, and again, just for its cultural and historical significance, Raya and the Last Dragon will always have a special place in my heart. So with that, I'm going to give Raya and the Last Dragon an A-. Alright, so that's going to do it for this review. Thank you so much for watching, but as I said earlier, I did want to leave some room at the end of this video for a short discussion on the problems facing the Asian American community today, so if you have a few extra minutes to spare, I would greatly appreciate you sticking around for this part as well. So over the past year or so, the number of hate crimes against Asians in America has increased dramatically, and around the world too, but I'll mostly be talking about cases that I've heard in America. And I'll share with you 3 quick ones. The first one is a video that I actually believe it went viral kind of early on last year, or maybe mid last year. It was an elderly Asian man. He was collecting cans in a neighborhood, and without provocation, this group of people started harassing him verbally, and then they started getting physical with their abuse. They were throwing stuff at him. One person was swinging a broom at him really violently, and he's in tears by the end of the video. It's really hard to watch. I'll leave the link in the description below, but just be advised, it's very difficult to watch and believe that this happened to someone, especially an elderly person. The second one is, and again, I'll leave a link in the description below for this story too, but there was a woman, another elderly Asian person, a woman in New York, who was set on fire on her way home one day. She was set on fire, and luckily she's okay. She did receive a couple of burns, but just a random hate crime. She doesn't know who did it. I don't know if they ever found out who did it. I mean, but do you even need to know, like, why this was... I'm sorry, I'm having a kind of a hard time articulating, but to even say that sentence and know that it's reality, that an elderly Asian woman was set on fire without provocation for no reason by a random assailant, whom I don't know if they've caught at this point, is absolutely mind-boggling to me. And the last one is the saddest story for me personally. And this happened the most recently as well. I think earlier this year. In, I believe it was either San Diego or San Francisco, there was an 84-year-old Thai man who was pushed down on the ground by some 20-year-old, I think, just randomly pushed down in the middle of the day to the ground, and he hit his head hard enough on the concrete that he passed away from his injuries. And obviously that hit the hardest, not only because in this instance he passed away, which is blood boiling, I think, but also him being Thai, you know, obviously I've said I'm Thai, but, you know, to me, it's my grandma, you know, it's my girlfriend's grandpa, it's my girlfriend's grandma, it's people that I've seen day in and day out, people that are related to me, people that are family friends, and, you know, the face of that man is the face of all of them. And I'm sure to many other people who are a part of the Asian American community as well, or just part of the Asian community. And it's sickening to see this stuff and to know that it's reality. But what's worse, I think, is that there's little to no coverage on any of this, especially if you watch the nightly news, if you watch the afternoon news. Have you heard of any of this? Am I telling you new information? So to me, the worst part is that I feel like a lot of times when I've seen Asian American people try to post about these problems and these issues facing their community, our community, on social media, or, you know, whatever outlet they choose, a lot of times I see it met with a lot of hatred and a lot of negativity. And it's people saying, you guys just got to stand up for yourselves, or like, why don't you organize and rally and protest, all this stuff. Why don't you stand up for yourselves as a community like other groups have done? And it's like, we did. There was a rally organized in California, and I think in New York too. It was, I believe the name of it was "You Can't Burn Us All," and it was in reaction and in anger to the elderly Asian woman who was set on fire in New York. Again, did you know about that? Did you hear about it? Is this brand new information to you? Because it feels not only like it's being shunned by mainstream media outlets, but it's being shunned by other people too. Fellow Americans, fellow people in this country. And it's really, really sad to see happen and unfold. And I don't want to take up too much time in this video talking about it. I think it deserves its own video, or its own series even, of issues facing Asian Americans in today's world. But the reason I bring it up in the first place is because I just want people, A, to be aware of it, and B, to stand up for it if you can. Not only if you're Asian American, but if you're in this country at all as an American, if you see discrimination, if you see hatred, please, I beg of you to stand up against it. Again, I know I've seen a lot of people saying, like, you need to stand up for yourselves, and I promise you, we are. It just feels like people aren't hearing us, or not listening, or worse yet, they don't care. So I'm asking you, and again, the reason I bring this up is just to say that, please, if you do see this, stand up and fight against it. So pardon the interruption, I'm actually here editing the video right now, and the reason I'm interjecting is because I'm a little worried that some of what I'm saying at least is coming across as if I am relying upon the help of people outside the Asian American community 100% to solve this problem, and please don't get it twisted. I think we could absolutely use the support of anyone who is willing to, but I also just want to make it really clear to other people in the Asian American community that not only, of course, we should be looking after each other, making sure we're all safe, which is just kind of like a basic human thing to do, but I think more importantly, with everything going on right now, it's also really, really important that we're able to embrace the culture that we've inherited, to embrace the culture that we were given, be proud of the fact that our parents they traveled thousands of miles across the ocean to be here and to make a better life for themselves and for us. And that's why it was so cool to watch this film, to have what has been, I think, traditionally kind of a subset of Asian culture represented so freely and so beautifully on the screen. But again, I think as a whole, one thing that the Asian American community could use a lot right now is just the embracing of our, embrace's not a word, is the ability to embrace and be proud of where we came from. Because of course, with the rise of hate crimes, I feel like it's really easy and maybe even tempting to suppress a part of you that people are targeting, to try and blend in with the rest of society so you don't stick out and you don't become a target for these crimes. But I feel like that's probably the worst thing that we could do right now. And whenever we get the chance to celebrate ourselves, like with movies like Raya and the Last Dragon or Crazy Rich Asians that came out 2 years ago, it's really important that we grab onto those moments. Anyways, I just wanted to clarify that, so thank you for giving me the space to do so, and thank you for listening if you've made it this far into the video. Again, the most important part about this to me is just raising awareness, because I feel like these issues just aren't garnering enough attention in the media. So thank you for listening, and now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Back to you, Jason. Alright, so that was a really somber note to leave this video off of, but we're at the end here, and again, if you have thoughts, let me know down in the comments below, either about the movie that we talked about, or, you know, kind of the issues facing the Asian American community today. So that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the content, like or subscribe below. That really helps out the channel. And until next time, stay safe, be kind. Thank you.